Peace, peace, greetings to you all. It's your brother Naheem, BKA Lord Abba, aka Mr. Just the Facts. Tonight we're gonna finish the conversation that we had Tuesday, where we were talking about basically this topic right here and dealing with Reconstruction, dealing with reparations. There was so much information that we wanted to get to on the reparations element. The Reconstruction element, that we didn't have a chance to get to it. So, I'm going to go in. I'm waiting for my brothers to join me. They're running a little bit behind. I just want to pull up my screen on YouTube. On Facebook, so that I can watch the live comments from Facebook and possibly comment on those when I can. But for whatever reason, I cannot find it right now. But what I want to do, how I want to get started is I want to start off by getting into an article to frame tonight's conversation, because it is our belief here at Be the Power that a new Reconstruction initiative must take place, because the old Reconstruction, it never happened. It never got off the ground. The things that were supposed to be done for us never got done. They were never accomplished at all. So one of the things that I want to do in starting off this particular broadcast is I want to get into some of the background of Reconstruction and understanding of our role in it. So I'm going to start reading here. Give me 1 second. Let me share my screen. Okay. So this is from the History Channel's website. And I'm just going to read it, because I think, like I said, people need to understand where we are with, where we are today from whence we came, as I was trying to say. Okay, this article was published 2 years ago, August 21st, 2018. It says Black Leaders During Reconstruction. And I want to read this thing. It's not a long article at all. So bear with me, because I think that it's important that we get to a basic understanding of Reconstructionism. Okay. One of the most important aspects of Reconstruction was the active participation of African Americans, including thousands of former slaves, in the political, economic, and social life of the South. Now, there's a reason why the South is highlighted, and not just the United States of America. The era was, to a great extent, defined by their quest for autonomy and equal rights under the law, both as individuals and for the Black community as a whole. During Reconstruction, some 2,000 African Americans held public office. Let me read that line again. During Reconstruction, some 2,000 African Americans held public office, from the local level all the way up to the U.S. Senate, though they never achieved representation in government proportionate to their numbers. So we have some issues, but this is also a dig at, those sovereignty MERS, the MUURSs, and the Moors that say that we were never citizens on this land. If we were never citizens on this land, we wouldn't have never been able to hold any public offices at all. So, historical information like this puts to bed a lot of the sovereign citizen doctrine. Rise of Black activism. Before the Civil War began, African Americans had only been able to vote in a few northern states, and there were virtually no Black office holders. The months after the Union victory in April 1865 saw extensive mobilization within the Black community, with meetings, parades, and petitions calling for legal and political rights, including the all-important right to vote. During the first 2 years of Reconstruction, Blacks organized equal rights leagues throughout the South and held state and local conventions and protest discriminatory treatment and demand suffrage as well as equity before the law. Some of what we're going through today, but I think in places like Alabama, Georgia, and Mississippi, we need to get back to protesting voter suppression. And we got to make sure that we're not just doing it during an election year. This is something that has to be constant, and it's something that I'm willing to do in the state that I currently reside in Georgia. If there's anybody that want to coordinate on that front, holding rallies and protests about the way the Republicans cheat down here in the South, and their cheating is to largely disenfranchise our people, because we are usually the group that swing votes in the Democratic favor, although we are trying to vote our interests now, as opposed to just voting for party. And I think brothers like myself who have, been learning the past year and some change under Yvette Carnell and Antonio Moore and sisters, I think we need to gather up and see if this is a possible route that we can take, because our right to suffrage is being hampered in places like Atlanta, for instance, where, as I showed on the last show, lines stretched, it seemed like a mile just to vote, cars lined up on sides of the road just to vote. That's voter suppression. This is a throwback from the Reconstruction era. Let me continue. It says, did you know in 1967, almost a century after Hiram Revels and Blanche Bruce served in the U.S. Senate during Reconstruction, Edward Brooke of Massachusetts became the first African-American senator elected by popular vote. So it took all the way from Reconstruction, after slavery was ended in the South, until 1967, of 402 years later, before we actually had senatorial representation. Let me continue. It says, these African-American activists bitterly opposed the Reconstruction policies of President Andrew Johnson, who is the worst president in U.S. history, although Trump seems like he's trying to catch up with some of his recent moves and statements, like wanting to hold a rally in Tulsa on June 19th. I'm just saying. Which excluded blacks from Southern politics and allowed states' legislatures to pass restrictive black codes regulating the lives of the freedmen and women. Fierce resistance to these discriminatory laws, as well as growing opposition to Johnson's policies in the North, led to a Republican victory in the U.S. congressional elections of 1866 and to a new phase of Reconstruction that would give African Americans a more active role in the political, economic, and social life of the South. So what we see here is, after Lincoln gets assassinated, the vice president, Andrew Johnson, who was a dirtbag, that's a nice way for me to put it, he never was an abolitionist. He wasn't for our people. Lincoln chose him because he was an anti-elitist. He spoke up against the bourgeoisie class in the United States of America, some of whom Lincoln opposed as well. That's why Andrew Johnson, this racist, was the vice president. And as soon as he became the president, he undid everything that Lincoln did in the Union Army, and things went terribly wrong after that, and we're still suffering from that till this day. And another point I want to note is that when it says it led to a Republican victory in the U.S. congressional elections of 1866, back then the Republican Party was the left wing of today's politics. Today's left wing is the Democratic Party. Look up the Dixiecrats. Look up the passage of the Civil Rights Act in 1965, and you'll understand how Republicans became Democrats and how Democrats became Republicans. Do not let the people who call themselves Black conservatives or Black Republicans ever trick you with this idea that the Democratic Party of today is the same party that it was yesterday that enslaved our people and fought against all of our rights. That's one of the tricks that Candace Owens and so-called Black Republicans, so-called Black conservatives try to use. Okay, a radical change. It says, during the decade known as Radical Reconstruction, 1867 through 77, 10 years, Congress granted African-American men the status and rights of citizenship, including the right to vote, as guaranteed by the 14th and 15th Amendments to the U.S. Constitution. Now, those of us that follow the teachings of Prophet Noble Drew Ali and what he said about the historical application of the 14th and 15th Amendments, it did not necessarily grant us the right to vote. And we showed and proved that on the citizenship show that we did a couple of shows back, dealing with citizenship and ethnicity. In fact, the fact that we voted in at least 5 early Southern states proves that the 14th and 15th Amendment did not give us the right to vote or make us citizens. It just ensured that those whom were freed in the South were given that right because of the violations of the Civil Rights Act that the Southern states were undertaking in the South. Okay, so let me continue. Beginning in 1867, branches of the Union League, which encouraged the political activism of African Americans, spread throughout the South. During the state constitutional conventions held in 1867 through 69, Blacks and white Americans stood side by side for the first time in political life. So as you hear the Be the Power group calling for a new Reconstruction initiative, which its first principles has to be built upon reparations, i.e. reparative justice, we get an understanding of where and why we're drawing this sentiment from. Let me repeat, blacks and white Americans stood side by side for the first time in political life. That's what's important. Us standing side by side in political life. This is where you hear the term white allies from. And this is why Dr. King would excoriate the ideas of Stokely Carmichael and saying that we don't need white allies and we don't need white people in the movement, and why King had an issue with the term Black Power. Well, let me see if any of my brothers is on. Okay, I got 2 of my brothers in the chat. So I'm going to wrap this up. I mean, it was a short read, really, but I'm going to end here. It says, blacks made up the overwhelming majority of Southern Republican voters, which is still the case today, with the exception that they're Democrats, forming a coalition with quote-unquote carpetbaggers and quote-unquote scallywags, derogatory terms referring to recent arrivals from the North and Southern white Republicans, respectively. A total of 265 African American delegates were elected, more than 100 of whom had been born into slavery. Almost half of the elected black delegates served in South Carolina and Louisiana, where blacks had the longest history of political organization. Then in most other states, African Americans were underrepresented compared to their population. In all, 16 African Americans served in the U.S. Congress during Reconstruction. More than 600 were elected to the state legislatures, and hundreds more held local offices across the South. And I want to read this sentence real quick again. A total of 265 African American delegates were elected, more than 100 of whom had been born into slavery. There's some Moorish brothers, and I shared this on my wall, and they shared a picture of a bunch of freedmen who, it's a picture from Reconstruction, which shows that, well, the caption says, excuse me, it shows these elected officials. And the caption says something to the effect that we were never slaves. Everybody that follows the doctrine of the what I call the Fakemores know what they try to tout. But history will always prove these people wrong. And this is a part of our job in this particular space, and that is to clean up and clear up a lot of those misconceptions. My brothers, if y'all ready to come on, let me know. I don't know why it doesn't seem like y'all are on the stream. Oh, okay. Peace, brother Josh. Dr. Logic, let me know when you're ready to come on, brother.
Can you hear me?
Peace. I hear y'all.
Peace.
Okay.
I'm ready.
Cool.
I'm ready.
Hold on, family. Let me make a little adjustment here. Is it? Let me know how the background noise sound. Can you hear the background noise?
A little bit.
Just a little bit. Ain't nothing too crazy. Nothing too crazy.
Let me go down here. Let me go down here. I'm
Yeah,
on daddy duty.
I mean, while you getting ready, go ahead, brother. Where L go in, bro?
Yo, that piece I was listening to you read is one of my favorite pieces. I love that piece. It rings so true, and it really encompasses a lot of the pain and destruction that happened during Reconstruction. I wanted to read that piece. I'm glad you read it. I didn't even have to read it because you read it, and that just shows you how on point we are and in sync with this situation and what is really needed. Now, tonight's show, we're talking about Reconstruction, redress, reparations, right? So we must understand that Reconstruction is where everything that should have happened for us didn't happen. The redress part of this is the apology that's necessary for why it didn't happen. And the reparations is the part that it needs to repair and restore what didn't happen, right? We need to understand that most of the American descendants of slavery failure is baked in to not just chattel slavery, which is really speaking to a lot of the lostness that comes from our sweat equity and our value of our body and our work effort that built this country. But what was baked into post-Civil War policies and legislation that they call Reconstruction, and it's really a part of history that has not really been taught, and so I just want to read a little piece out of an article that is speaking about this issue, and I thought it was very, very important. And I just want to read a little bit out of it, So when we pull this up, I'll dig into it, and they frame it very seriously. And I got some comments after that. Abba, if you can pull it up.
Oh, okay.
The screen share.
My bad. I'm trying to get to the video on Facebook. Yeah, go ahead, bro. It's up.
Yes. We need to understand how important this Reconstruction is. All right, so I want to go up and read how they introduce this. This is an American Affairs article, okay? An article entitled American Affairs anyway. They got the King of Cotton. See, understand, before I read this, the King Cotton, what they're saying in this piece of political this political comic is that cotton is king. Who's picking the cotton? Us. In Mississippi, there's actually a man who is referred to as the Cotton King. My family worked on that plantation. Understand the ADOS-ness in that, right? The name of this is Reconstruction and the End of History. Understand what that means, right? So listen, let me highlight this real quick so everybody can be on the same page, right? The years between 1865 and 1877, from the period in American history known as Reconstruction, in this case, meaning the rebuilding of the federal union, which had been disrupted by the attempt of 11 southern states to secede from the union in order to protect legalized slavery. It might have been a new era of malice toward none, charity for all, and the wake of the Civil War's destructiveness. Instead, Reconstruction is, in particular fact, the bad boy of American history, unwept, unhonored, most untaught, and only visible in public awareness as something vaguely awful. And it suffers from an absence of the kind of battles and leaders material and makes the Civil War so colorful, and it dissipates into a confusing tale of lost opportunities, squalid victories, and embarrassed defeats. This is what they're saying about the Reconstruction history. And I've talked to my brothers so many times about the importance of Reconstruction history. The importance of Reconstruction history and how impactful the absence of this history is on our everyday lives. When we start talking about reparations, when we start talking about our justice claim, we have to understand most of that is rooted in what was supposed to happen in Reconstruction but didn't. Reconstruction is the most important period in American history, starting with the Civil War. We look at the Civil War as just some battle or some war that happened in America. We need to understand. I think my brother Ali said it eloquently that there was over 200,000 foundational Black Americans that fought in the Civil War. That was our war. It was the war for America. In that war, we won the fight to break the chains of chattel slavery. We did that. If you look at our history, specifically the Civil War and post-Reconstruction, that small space in time, you can look at all of the evidence that proves without a shadow of a doubt that there is absolutely nothing that we can't do in this country. We are literal superheroes in what we call America. America has produced a unique people, a unique breed of human being called the American descendants of slavery. The freedmen were some of the most accomplished people that ever existed. If you do the history, and we're going to, in the show in the future, we're going to highlight some of the freedmen and how courageous they were, how miraculous their accomplishments were, and how heroic their life was, and their legacy is still to this day. And even though we got a Black History Month, we talk about the same people over and over, and even those people deserve recognition. Don't get me wrong. But we never talk about some of the great heroes during the Reconstruction era who lived in the face of the most radical white supremacists and the most destructive domestic terrorism that went supported by state sanctions and went unchecked and unpunished that we can ever dream about. And these people were literally superheroes, y'all. When we do that show, it's going to blow your mind. But if you don't know, you know Sojourner Truth, you should know Prince Rivers. You know Booker T. Washington, you should know Hiram Revels, right? And there's so many more that we're going to really flesh out and bring to the forefront. And we need to have this education. Every man, woman, and child who is of this lineage should know about these people. This fuels the spiritual fire of our reparations claim. These are the ancestors that we're fighting to fulfill their legacy over. So I'm just introducing where I'm coming from. I'm going to come with some more information later. I see my man Ali just jumped on. I'm going to go ahead and pass it back to Abba. Abba, you can do what you want to do with it. And, you know, we're going to get it in tonight.
You're still on mute, bro.
My bad, y'all. Brother Josh, go in, add on, and then shoot it over to Brother Ali.
Oh yeah. I mean, Reconstruction. When you think about it, you know, we had this conversation last time, but we had this conversation it's just been something I've just been building in my mind to think about what our destiny would have been if they would have just, when I'm talking about business to the black codes, they just if they just made it equal after, all right, y'all free, but we're gonna uphold the laws and just let you be regular citizens like everybody else. I mean, you think about that. If they just let us be foundational in the economy, where we had control of our own destiny as of 1865. I mean, you probably would be seeing, like, there was one brother that was talking about he had some stocks. He was, I got Apple stock or whatever. You would be seeing our people that own an Apple, that own Twitter, it will own, Facebook or whatever. I mean, we would have institutions that rival that. Maybe we buy some of those out, or maybe they buy us out. So it wouldn't be this humongous wealth gulf, and that just changes the whole trajectory of our lineage. It changes the whole trajectory of the United States. But of course, that did not happen. That did not happen. And so what I wanted to do was I wanted to just share just some of the accounts of some of the things that happened, because I don't think people understand what happened. Let me just share my screen. Hold on. Because this show is Reconstruction, Redress, Reparations. So we need to understand what we got instead of Reconstruction. This is what we got right here. And this is the story of Robert Glee. I went in on this maybe a show a couple
before you go in,
back, but
before you go in, Josh, let me say, everybody, please click the like button, hit share this on Facebook, tweet it out, get it out there to the family. Like we teaching, and we have to start moving in this direction now. One of the things that I read not too long ago basically show how all of us participated in our own freedom back in those days, and all of us participated in the political activity, and we must do the same thing today. So please share and hit the like button and hit subscribe if you haven't already done so. Hit that little bell icon next to it so that you'll be notified whenever we go live. And I mean, hitting the like button, baby, is something easy to do. It's just showing love. That's all it is. If you're on YouTube, if you're on Facebook, shout out to y'all. But go over to YouTube and hit the like button as well. Go ahead, Brother Josh.
Yeah, this is from chapter 10, or maybe it's not chapter 10, but it's part 10 of a chapter. I don't remember which one it is in Dr. Darry's book called "From Here to Equality: Reparations for Black Americans in the 21st Century." And he's talking about sins of the sons and daughters, right? I'm just gonna start. I'm kind of gonna jump through here, but it says the first indictment must be the failure to fulfill the promise of the grant of 40 acres and a mule to families who have been enslaved. Had that promise been kept, had ex-slaves been given a substantial endowment of Southern real estate, it is likely that there would be no need for reparations to be under consideration now. If the 40 acres had been allocated roughly to families of 4, each slave would have received 10 acres of land. Since there were approximately 4 million freedmen, a total of 40 million acres of land should have been allocated to formerly enslaved blacks. The scale of the largest Southern plantations was enormous. The Cameron Benahan plantation in North Carolina spanned 47 square miles, or 30,000 acres. Paul Cameron, the owner of the plantation, claimed at the peak of his enterprise to have owned 1,900 human beings. That total would have constituted approximately 475 families. 400. This man owned 475 families. So you got to think, like, whoo, that's like how many? 475 great grandfathers and grandmothers of us. Now, all of them people probably had 5, 10 kids apiece. All of the women. So let's just say, I mean, then all of them had 5, 6, 7 kids, and then all of them had 3, 4 kids, and then those might have had some kids. So imagine today, like, how many people just came from his plantation alone.
Sure.
That's like whole towns that came from this man plantation.
For real. Jeez.
Just one man plantation. And not only that, think about how much money that is. If you have 1,900 human beings, and they said that the average value of a field a slave with with 3 years of field training was worth more than a house.
Mm-hmm.
So how much capital was he able to leverage? And when after the Civil War was over, when the net human chattel was emancipated, and he lost a lot of stuff, how much was he able to recover? Well, the answer is due to the black codes and due to all of the methods of re-enslavement, he was basically able to get back. And this is coming from somebody who was supposed to have been stripped of everything, from being a traitor, from being treasonous, from rebelling against his country, from violating even the 14th Amendment that came after.
That's right.
You know. So let me just continue. It says, if his full estate had been divided evenly among the number of families in Cameron held in bondage, each family would have received more than 60 acres of land. So when we talk about reparations, all you got to do is break up the slave owner, these devils' land, and give it to the people that was on the plantation. Like some of that stuff, you wouldn't even have to appropriate new lands from the government. Just take what they got and give it to us, because it shouldn't
Basically,
have been, they enslaved us anyway.
They shouldn't have had it in
Our
the first
claim
place.
would have been, he shouldn't have had it in the first place.
That's right.
And he damn shouldn't have been able to come back after the fact and get it back. So it says, while 40 acres was small compared to the scale of many American slave plantations, it would have been a substantial allotment. Yeah. In 2013, the median American home was located on 8,596 square feet of land, or 0.2 acres. Therefore, an average of 200 residences could have been built on a typical tract of land that should have been distributed to ex-slaves. So one of them, just one claim for one person that was on that plantation could house 200 people.
Wow.
Today. Now, I've been talking for a while. I'm gonna keep this bookmark, and when it come back around to me, I'm gonna go in on another point. But I just wanted to share that for right now.
All right.
Y'all got to pick up this book. I'm telling you, reparations is the conversation today.
Reparations.
Like, we got to get it.
I've shared about, I don't know, man, 5 or 6 stories since yesterday, headlines about reparations. So yeah, it's dominating. Brother Ali, then I'm gonna come in real quick and just read something, and then we're gonna go back to Brother Where I want you to go in, bro.
Peace. Yeah. So just to keep in line with everything, reparations is indeed the order of the day, and I want to read a little bit from Frederick Douglass. I want to share this. You know what? I'm just going to read it. But then I'll share this other page that I really want to go in from W.E.B. Du Bois's book called Black Reconstruction in America. But anyway, Frederick Douglass says this. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah. Good. You loud and clear.
Frederick Douglass says, once let the black man get upon his person the brass letter, U.S. Let him get an eagle on his button, right, and a musket on his shoulder and bullets in his pocket. There's no power on earth that can deny that he has earned the right to citizenship. This is this is cited by it's in the National Archives regarding black soldiers in the United States military during the Civil War. So I'm going to come out of there and I'm going to share this real quick from W.E.B. Du Bois's Black Reconstruction. So the reason I read that is because I want people to understand that our folks fought in the Civil War, and I'm going to show the numbers later on, the breakdown that they have in terms of how many people actually fought in the Civil War. So when European Americans talk about try to make the different arguments as anti-reparations arguments, we have different things that we can show that, hey man, we contributed a lot to this country. So let me just share this. Let me just share this page real quick, and let me know if you can see this.
Mm-hmm.
All right, this is a chapter called "Back Towards Slavery." Now, I wanted to read this because I want people to understand the different things that were done to us. And I think, as we were talking earlier, it's important for us to begin to really point out the depth of the things that was done to us and how this kind of really started all the way back during the time of Reconstruction, when like you guys say, they overthrew Reconstruction. It wasn't a failed thing, they overthrew it.
Word.
So Back Towards Slavery. This is W.E.B. Du Bois, Black Reconstruction, 1860 to 1880. He says, how civil war in the South began again. It began again, indeed, had never ceased. And how Black Prometheus, bound to the rock of ages by hate, hurt, and humiliation, has his vitals eaten out as they grow, yet lives and fights. He says, it must be remembered and never forgotten that the Civil War in the South, which overthrew Reconstruction, was a determined effort to reduce Black labor as nearly as possible to a condition of unlimited exploitation and build a new class of capitalists on this foundation. The wage of the Negro worker, despite the war amendments, was to be reduced to the level of bare subsistence by taxation, peonage, caste, and every method of discrimination. This program had to be carried out in open defiance of the clear letter of the law. The lawlessness in the South since the Civil War has varied in its phases. First, it was that kind of disregard for law which follows all war. Then it became a labor war, an attempt on the part of impoverished capitalists and landholders to force laborers to work on the capitalists' own terms. From this, it changed to a war between laborers, white and Black men fighting for the same jobs. Afterward, the white laborer joined the white landholder and capitalist and beat the Black laborer into subjection through secret organizations and the rise of a new doctrine of race hatred. It's always difficult to stop war, and doubly difficult to stop a civil war. Inevitably, when men have long been trained to violence and murder, the habit projects itself into civil life after peace, and there is crime and disorder and social upheaval, as we who live in the backwash of World War know too well. In the case of civil war, where the contending parties must rest face to face after peace, there can be no quick and perfect peace. When to all this you add a servile and disadvantaged race, who represent the cause of war and who afterwards are left near naked to their enemies, war may go on more secretly, more spasmodically, and yet as truly as before the peace. This was the case in the South after Lee's surrender. Emancipation loosened the finer feelings of some Southerners toward Negroes. They felt the fall of a burden and expressed it. The nightmare was last over. They need no longer apologize to the world for a system they were powerless to change or reconstruct. They had been changed and they were glad, but emancipation left the planters poor and with no method of earning a living except by exploiting Black labor on their only remaining capital, their land. This underlying economic urge was naturally far stronger than the philanthropic and motivated the mass of Southerners. So I'm gonna go on later. I'm gonna find some more pieces that I think is important. But this particular book, W.E.B. Du Bois really speaks about how Reconstruction really did not work for Black America. Really did not work for Black America. And he gives a lot of details on a lot of the things that happened to our people during the time period right after the fall of Reconstruction. So I just wanted to read a little bit of that and just let people know who may not be aware of this book that this is also a resource that we can use to give some insight.
Say the name of that book again, brother.
It's called Black Reconstruction in America by W.E.B. Du Bois. It covers the periods from 1860 to 1880.
That's one queued up in my Audible that I just never got Got to. I have so many books and stuff to read.
Yeah.
I was, as you were talking, I was reading the rest of what was in that page, man. And my God, yo.
Listen to this next piece real quick. Carl Schurz said some planters held back their former slaves on their plantations by brute force. Armed bands of white men patrolled the county roads to drive back the Negroes wandering about. Dead bodies of murdered Negroes were found on and near the highways and byways. Gruesome reports came from the hospitals, reports of colored men and women whose ears had been cut off, whose skulls had been broken by blows, whose bodies had been slashed by knives or lacerated with scourges. A number of such cases I had occasion to examine myself. A veritable reign of terror prevailed in many parts of the South.
Wow.
Many testify that the Southern people seem to have transferred their wrath at the federal government to the colored people. This disorder and utter lack of control was widespread. So, anyway, like I said, this book really kind of outlines a lot of what happened. This is just another source that we can use from one of our great scholars, W.E.B. Du Bois, outlining a lot of what occurred during and after Reconstruction.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
I want my brother Where L to come on real quick. I want to get into the new Jim Crow, right? The new Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander is a crucial read for anybody. And I'm on his website, and it's called the New Jim Crow Study Guide. I'm not going to pull it up on the screen, but I just want to say this, and I want to read something real quick, right? It says, "We have not ended racial caste in America. We have merely redesigned it." This is the narrator's introduction. "A racial caste is one in which people are locked into an inferior position by law and custom according to the color of their skin. Many like to believe that the racial caste system was overcome during the civil rights era. However, systems such as mass incarceration have evolved to ensure that it continues. 2. Any candid observer of American racial history must acknowledge that racism is highly adaptable. A thread runs between slavery, Jim Crow laws, and mass incarceration. It shows the way racism and the racial caste system have been able to adapt and evolve to the changing times. The system of mass incarceration adapted to advertise itself as quote unquote colorblind and race neutral. This was despite the fact that a majority of those incarcerated are disproportionately minorities, meaning black people. All right, I want to read my book right here, y'all. It stays near me, The Bloody Shirt. I want to read real quick. This is coming from page 264. And it goes in on this devil right here, Pitchfork Ben Tillman. I don't know if y'all can see this devil real clear.
Pitchfork Ben Tillman.
Pitchfork Ben is what they called him. All right, it says, Ben Tillman came to be known as Pitchfork Ben Tillman, and with his fierce one-eyed glower and plebeian misshapen hats and profane speeches, styled himself a populist. He said the Citadel in Charleston were the quote-unquote aristocrats, sent their sons was nothing but a quote military dude factory, end quote. That the South Carolina college where most of the rest went turned out helpless, good for nothings, too proud to beg, too honest to steal, too lazy to work. He cursed and ran it against the Bourbons and said he was for the little man. He was elected governor and then United States senator. And for 40 years, he fought off attacks by the Bourbons and the real populace alike by reviving the horrors of quote unquote Negro misrule that he said the state had endured under Reconstruction. That was his ticket to power. In 40 years of political life, he offered what he called, quote, a solid front to all corners on the bond of white supremacy, end quote. He stood on the floor of the United States Senate and jabbed his finger and said, we had to shoot the Negroes, and recounted again and again how the black man had, quote unquote, tasted blood, had been infected by unscrupulous northern carpetbaggers with the virus of equality. Back in those dark days, and that the only way to make sure that it never happened again was for whites to remain united politically behind him, men like him who weren't afraid to tell the truth about how they had to shoot, quote unquote, niggers back then. And I wanted to read that in context of the new Jim Crow, the adaptability of racism and what's called white supremacy, which is what we have today. It is a facade. It is a rallying cry that men use out of the hatred in their hearts for another group of beings. And it was used, it was weaponized. White supremacy was weaponized as a political cudgel used to bludgeon not only our people, but Northerners who were then the left-wing Republican Party as well. And I think Michelle Alexander's book unequivocally captures this evolution from what this man just said on through the 60s. Even my brother Josh has eloquently laid out how we get from Nixon's, what would they call, enterprise zones to today's opportunity zones, right? Yeah. And through every phase, whether it was Obama, whether it was Clinton, these politicians have a shrewd way of keeping up and streamlining white supremacy in some way. So, brother, Dr. Logic, brother, take it away, brother.
Yeah, I'm glad you said everything that you just said. It's a good segue because what I'm going to show you now, the brother mentioned white supremacy a couple times, and I'm going to show you how white supremacy was baked in. Oftentimes, when you hear, programs like this talk about white supremacy, it's looked at as some sort of black power talking point that is fictional. It's not rooted in any real history. Listen to this. Out of the same book Abba was talking about, this comes out of a journal. Well, it comes out of a pamphlet called On Behalf of the White People of South Carolina Against the Constitution of the Late Convention of the State, now submitted to Congress for ratification. To contextualize that and to frame that, during Reconstruction, the 11 southern states that succeeded had federal mandates and they had conditions in order to be readmitted to the Union. They had to ratify the Reconstruction amendments, and they had to do over and reconstruct their state constitutions, which is going to be a very important point that I'm going to bring up later with our entire focus and plight for a new Reconstruction movement in honor of the legacy of the freedmen. But let me tell you what was going on back then and what the conversation was from the people in South Carolina. If you think white supremacy is some bedtime story that black folks tell their children and it doesn't really exist, listen to this. That Constitution was the work of Northern adventurers, Southern renegades, and ignorant Negroes. Not one percentium of the white population of the state approves it, and not 2% of the Negroes who voted for its adoption know any more than a dog, horse, or cat. But his act of voting even implied. The Constitution enfranchises every male Negro over the age of 21. The Negro being in a large numerical majority. This is key. In states, even today, but especially back then, before we had the northern migration, Mississippi, Alabama, South Carolina, Louisiana, and even Georgia were predominantly populated by black people. You're talking about 4 million freedmen. They were heavily concentrated in the South. And they're talking about the political fear is that we being able to access democracy. because democracy is about majority rule. And they had saturated the political market, so to speak, with black folks. So now that Civil War is over and chattel slavery is over, black folks get suffrage, and now we're able to participate in the political system down south. And I want to speak on a previous point made by my brother Abba, and just really kind of caveat what he was saying for the 14th Amendment. You had people voting in various other states. But during this very early time, you had black folks voting, free black folks voting in the North and in other states before the 14th Amendment was passed. That's a fact. But the passing of the Civil Rights Act of 1866 and the 14th and 15th Amendment, what that did, because a lot of people just don't understand how the government is set up, was it uniformed the constitutional language so that states had to fall in line under a uniform code for citizenship so that they could go anywhere in the union and their citizenship was recognized. So meaning that I can't have, or I won't be recognized as a citizen in New York, but then when I travel to, let's say, South Carolina, they can deny my citizenship because states' rights were doing that. States were denying citizenship for people who are recognized as citizens in other states. They were a part of their state citizenry. They voted, they participated in all kind of political activity. But when they traveled south, states denied their citizenship. So that's why the federal government had to come in and create uniform political and legal language so that states could not deny. There's a difference between not having citizenship and denying citizenship.
That's right.
You understand? So let me continue. That new constitution establishes in this state Negro supremacy. Look at that language. The Constitution in that state establishes Negro supremacy with all its train and countless evils. A superior race, a portion, senators and representatives of the same proud race to which is your pride to belong, is put under the rule of an inferior race. And abject slaves of yesterday, the flushed freedmen of today, and think you there can be any just lasting reconstruction on this basis. We do not mean to threaten resistance by arms, but the white people of our state will never quietly submit to Negro rule. We may have to pass under the yoke you have authorized, but we will keep this consent until we have regained the heritage of political control handed down to us by an honored ancestry. This is a duty we owe to the land that is ours, to the graves that it contains, and to the race of which you and we are alike members. The proud Caucasian race whose sovereignty on earth God has ordained. Now, if we're not talking about white supremacy, what are we talking about? White supremacy is not some bedtime story frightened black people tell their children.
That's right.
It is actual history, and it's baked into the legal language and legislation of this country. We have to understand this, right?
I got something I want to add on.
Come on now.
Just to support what you're saying in terms of white history. This brother was a friend of mine, a constitutional law professor, who actually assisted me with my 14th Amendment research. Posted a piece that he's been working on, and inside of this piece, he cites a case from out of Florida. The case is called Luke versus the state of Florida. This was in 1853. Listen to what it says here, just to add on to this whole white supremacist thing and the ideology and how long this thing has been here, and it's still here. So it says here, from the case of Luke versus state of Florida, the perpetuation of slavery Indeed, the common safety of the citizens during its continuance would seem to require that the superiority of the white or Caucasian race over the African Negro should be ever demonstrated and preserved so far as the dictates of humanity will allow. The degraded caste should be continually reminded of their inferior position, to keep them in a proper degree of subjection to the authority of the free white citizens. And thus there is an obvious propriety in visiting their offenses with more degrading punishment than is inflicted on the white citizens, while the humanity of the law is demonstrated by securing to them the same forms of law and making defense, a trial by jury, compulsory process for their witnesses, and aid of counsel, and indeed as full, fair, and impartial a trial as can or may be claimed by a white person. So I just wanted to read that just to show you that this is a court case that probably, from the way the caption is reading, it looks like it's a Supreme Court case, but I'm going to look at it just to be sure, because it says Luke versus State of Florida. So at the very least, it's a federal case. I just want to say that this thing really encapsulates the mentality of white supremacy. And not only white supremacy, how that thing has manifested in the criminal justice system in terms of how blacks are dealt with in judicial proceedings, as well as how they're dealt with when it comes down to punishment for crimes that they've been convicted of. So I just wanted to add that, man. This stuff is very systemic in terms of how it's been ingrained at different in different branches of the government, because this is the judiciary, and we've also had legislation. So you could go ahead, bro. I just wanted to add that in.
Yeah, I wanted to bring Josh in, but yeah, no, go ahead.
Let me just say this right before we pass it on. Right, I see a very problematic issue reverberating in the chat section. Right, I don't want to spend too much time on that, but I have to address it. It can't go unchecked. We have certain things saying, we have certain people making certain comments that just don't make no sense.
None at all.
I'm going to read them off, and then I'm going to address them all with the same message, right? It says Caucasian is a pseudo term. All right. I understand that, brother. First of all, I want to tell you, I understand that. It says all non-Africans are Asiatic. I disagree with that. And that could also be qualified as a pseudo term, depending on who you're talking to.
Facts.
I just want to tell you, right? You must understand this. I ain't gonna even call it academic, but some of the things that you research and you have in your mind really don't matter when we talk about the application of power, because what makes things real in the material world is the exercise of power that impact your life. So if somebody wants Caucasian to be real and have real effects on your life, and they exercise the power to do that, you saying that it's pseudo don't mean anything. Understand that. Understand what I'm telling you. We need to know that these white people these Europeans, these so-called Caucasians, whatever you want to call them, whatever you want to say about the psychology and the social constructs that they created, have real effects on our lives. You understand that? And you saying that it's fake don't mean nothing. We're talking about the history and how they have made this a real problem in our lives, how they've made this a real overwhelming oppression in our lives. So stop saying that stuff. You can't look at this live stream and think that we don't know these things. We know that. We're teaching you the actual history so you can understand what our oppression is rooted in and understand what we need to attack specifically. We're talking about specifics. We're not talking about all this other stuff that you're talking about. You can't go nowhere talking about, white folks are pseudo. We're not white. They believe that they white and they'll kill you about it.
That's right.
They'll shoot you in the face about it. They killed your grandparents about it. They killed your family about it. So stop doing that. Understand what we're trying to do here. Trying to present a real historical education so we can know what we need to address, what we need to understand, and how we need to move forward. Stop doing that. And I'm
And
done
then
with
you
that.
got real quick before I bring Josh on. You got one of these guys in here. Let me put it up on the screen. The 13th Amendment with the 20 sections as well as the 4 proclamations was lawfully amended in December 1865. Black is what they called us and also made us black because they wrote it into law.
No,
all right. Yeah. Look, first and foremost, we have a video on this channel. My brothers and I think it was me and my brother Grim, we absolutely destroyed that argument that the 13th Amendment.
But don't forget, me, you, Grim was on the phone with their leaders.
That's
and we
right.
Dumped them in the dust.
We were like, how long were we on the phone with them? Like 3-4 hours?
Like 4 hours.
Just destroying every single argument that these brothers had. So, like, there's a group of Moors that's running around spreading this misinformation. And until we are on the right page mentally, I don't really understand how we could get on the right page physically. How can I come together with somebody that is intentionally spreading falsehoods? I told the brother in the chat, I'll give you $500. My word as a man, if you could prove that the 13th Amendment with 20 sections, a pro-slavery doctrine, a pro-slavery document was ever ratified. It only got 6 positive votes. These people are, I don't know what's wrong with our people, but this is some of that lineage therapy that we hear spoken about in the ADOS movement that is desperately needed, because you got some people that really just want to be smart and sound like they're saying something different than everybody else. Well, when you put the scrutiny, the light of scrutiny on it, then you come to see that the stuff is bogus. It's not historically accurate. It is ahistorical. So, I mean, I look, I told the brother, it's a $500 offer on the table if he can prove that the 13th Amendment with 20 sections was in fact ratified in 1865 by Abraham Lincoln and not the real 13th Amendment with 2 sections. Like, they rejected that. And these brothers have never read any of the background information on any of this stuff. They have been told this by some fake Grand Sheik out in Baltimore named Bratton Bay. And they start with the Dingwell brothers, and they've been running with this stuff ever since. And it's false. And
we crushed all of them. Y'all wasn't around it. We crushed all of them and they capitulated. Right. They basically told us on the phone, not even basically, but specifically, just, all right, brothers, y'all right. Just leave us alone and don't say nothing about us in the public. That out of their own mouths. So them dudes is not it. They not it.
Right, yeah, nah.
Yeah, Brother Josh is having some issues. Brother Josh, you want to jump in?
Yeah, man. Can you hear me?
Definitely.
No, I kept freezing up. Can you hear me? Can you see me?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right, cool. Yeah, man, my internet was not working on my laptop, but so what I'm gonna do, instead of just sharing my screen, I'm just gonna read. I want to read some more, just continuing on, because again, I wanted to focus on having like the idea of where we're supposed to be or where we would have been. Hold on, man. I see. Got my sign down here. Anyway,
he'll be teaching in about 10 years.
Oh yeah. Oh well, he already teaching. He just got it on a different subject matter.
Definitely.
But it says on this one page here, it says, as we were talking about how if they would have allotted the land just off of this crazy plantation owner property, that would have been enough for like 200 people on one allotment.
Mm-hmm.
And it was saying while the allocation of 40 acres never happened, Black American farmers managed to amass 15 million acres of land by dint of their own efforts by 1910. Still, less than half of the amount ex-slaves should have received during Reconstruction, but not insubstantial. This was the peak of land ownership by Black farmers in the United States, with 218,000 farmers, full or partial owners. However, by 1997, Black farm land ownership had diminished to a mere 2.4 million acres. Let me say that again. From 15 million acres by 1910 less than a century later. Hey baby. I apologize, y'all. Ain't nothing I can do about it. I hope y'all bear with this information. My wife is not able to help me out today. But it says, however, by 1997, black farmland ownership had diminished to a mere 2.4 million acres. Today, so we had from 1910 to 1997, we had lost what is that? Almost 13 million acres. It says today we didn't gain, we had theft. So today, white landowners in the United States own more land than the whole of Black America. Ted Turner alone owns more than the equivalent of 1/4 of the acreage of land in possession of Black Americans. One person.
Crazy.
Don't that sound just like when I say the plantation had all
That's
that
right.
land?
Yo, that's exactly what that sounds like. Exactly.
The record of Black land loss generally has not been one of voluntary sales at market prices. The land African Americans lost over the 20th century was taken in some form and not sold freely. So obviously we didn't sell that land. That's what he's saying. In many instances, the land, Black land literally was seized in the climate of white terror. And then it goes on to show a close look at documented cases reveals more than 24,000 acres of farm and timberland were seized, including smaller properties like stores and city lots. This is one book they're talking about. And then I'm just going to fast forward. It's talking about Robert Gleed. In just one example, investigative reporters and the Associated Press used county records to chronicle the events leading up to ex-slave Robert Gleed's colossal loss of land, homestead, and business enterprise. In 1855, when he was about 17 years old, Gleed eluded his Virginia enslaver and established himself in Columbus, Mississippi, only to be apprehended when he could not produce his freedom papers. When he refused to say who owned him, Gleed was sold to John Miller. Like other blacks in the area, Gleed prospered in the years after the war under the protection of the U.S. Army. See, when we at least had some protection, so they couldn't just kill us and enslave us, we started having a little prosperity. It says literate and active in local politics, hint, hint. Gleed caught the attention of the state's military governor, who appointed him to the Columbus City Council. Notice it said military governor. And he made a successful bid for state senator in 1869, serving 2 terms. In 1875, he ran for sheriff of Lowndes County, Mississippi, by which point registered black voters, Republicans mostly, outnumbered white voters, who largely were aligned with the Democratic Party, 3,800 to 1,250. Now, that's just another point. I know you want to jump in, well, but I just wanted to say, like in Mississippi, we still got, in a lot of areas, we're the majority of people. So why is there no Robert Gleed in 2020 like that, like we had in 1867 and 1869 and all this kind of stuff, right? Think about that. A highly visible and much sought after advisor, Gleed held positions of president of the Mercantile Land and Banking Company and head of the County Chamber of Commerce. And he owned 250 acres of arable land, 3 city lots, and a general store. Now check this out. The night before the 1875 election, a mob of whites attacked the parade of his supporters. 4 blacks were killed, 1 on the sidewalk in front of Gleed's store. Whites set fires across the county, broke into Gleed's unoccupied house, destroyed his furnishings with gunfire, and shredded his wife's clothes. Gleed owed his life to a white friend who hid him in his well. The next day, the Democratic candidate for sheriff, a white man, won the election. Gleed and his family fled to Paris, Texas, abandoning their property. County records reveal that not long afterward, 2 Columbus whites claimed Gleed owed them money and foreclosed on his property.
These people.
A. Toby W. Johnson liquidated the store and stopped, pocketing $941 of 1875 money, right? City Councilman Bernard G. Hendrick took possession of 215 acres of Gleed's land to satisfy a supposed $125 debt. Hendrick also purchased the fleeing man's house and adjoining lot for $11 at auction and took possession of all remaining properties after paying $500. See, this is what we talking about. We talking about, somebody that's escaping slavery, that's building up this type of life back in 1875, only to have it stolen. What will be the legacy of what will be the life of his antecedents, the ones who came after him, right? That's living with us today. Like, what would those people's lives be looking like? I don't think there would be a poor black folks on government assistance or whatever the case may be in Mississippi. I don't think there would be amongst the bottom of the bottom, like we see with over 50% of our people in the United States. So that's what I just want to say. Like, if you don't understand that we need redress, and you don't understand that it has a specific origin that is not of our doing, that is, we are where we are in spite of all of this. We still here, the ones of us that survive. And you can't compare this story to somebody who came over here, people came over here in 1975 or 2005 or 2015. This is like a specific damage and harm that was done. So that's what I just wanted to share. I'm gonna turn it back over to y'all.
I just want to real quick, brother Ali Bey, you could come in after this. I want to share this with the people because this is an article, who owns the most land in America. So this is some guy named John Malone, who I've never heard of before. Says Malone made his fortune as a media tycoon, building the company Telecommunications Inc., or TCI, and acting as its CEO before selling it to AT&T for $50 billion in 1999. Malone's 2.2 million acres are located in Maine, New Mexico, Colorado, Wyoming, and include profitable cattle ranches. It says that the area that he owns is roughly equal to half the size of Lake Ontario. After him is Ted Turner. He only owns 2 million acres. The other guy, number one, owns 2.2 million. His ownership is roughly equal to twice as large as Rhode Island. The Emerson family, some of these names we're familiar with. Bezos is on this list as well. Scrolling through this thing, it looks like all European American people, or whom you all call white people. So, what happened to us that we were not able, that the land that we did have was taken from us, as Brother Josh was just reading. And now today, after being locked out and boxed out of any type of ownership, we have people owning 2 million acres of land. That's just small countries right there. So redress, we have the right as a people to petition this government for redress and grievances. And I think that it's high time that we start moving into what my brother, Dr. Logic, where L has called this new Reconstruction initiative. I think that is something that is worthy of a grander discussion.
Yeah. Two things real quick. The new Reconstruction initiative, in my personal soul and opinion, has to be framed under and moved in the spirit of our ancestors, who were the freedmen, who were assassinated for participating in Reconstruction, who were overthrown and driven out of their local, state, and federal offices during Reconstruction. So it has to be the freedmen. The freedmen never got to have their Reconstruction. That's why in the article I read, it's called Reconstruction. The Confederates got Reconstruction, but the freedmen didn't. So we have to have the freedmen's new Reconstruction initiative. It has to be centered around the freedmen and their legacy, because our ancestors won't be able to rest without us fulfilling that work. I just want to say that. And then I also have to speak to this. I'm sorry, but I have to recognize you as you present yourself. This clown, Amin Tutanakh, or whatever silly name he's calling himself. I'm sick of seeing your comments, brother, and I'm not here to disrespect anyone. That you're obviously making way too many comments to be paying attention to what we're actually saying. You are just typing. You are not listening to what we're saying. You are talking about what the word white is. That is not what this show is about. We can do a show. You can get with any of us on our social media sites in the inbox. You can call us, and we will blow your mind with information about the history of whiteness, the name, the title, the people, the origins of where they come from. You are not talking to, I don't know who you think you're talking to, but stop making them comments in the chat. We are some of the most sophisticated and most intelligent brothers when it comes from the origin of the human race and all types of knowledge pertaining to the psychology of the race classification system. We are talking to the general public about what we need to do right now in this space. Please stop flooding the chats with that spam. And until you can come back and find me one brother over there in Egypt right now that's calling themselves Amen anything, do not type nothing.
Definitely.
Yeah, that's funny. That's one of the things that we kind of like started talking about back when we was doing our back and forth with all of the House of Consciousness dudes was that whole Amen Sutek, Sarah Sutin Seti, all them kind of names like that. It's like, yo, nobody in Africa uses those kinds of names.
Real.
The people in Egypt don't even use those kinds of names.
Yeah, and ain't none of y'all built one pyramid over here yet. So shut up. This ain't about you. This is about you know what? This ain't about you pyramid worshipers and all of that other stuff. It has its significance, but that ain't right now. And ain't none of y'all proved to have any solutions for nobody. You've done nothing. So sit back and be quiet.
So you know what I wanted to look at? I wanted to go to Du Bois's piece one more time. It's another chapter called The Propaganda of History. And what he's talking about here is how they started their racist propaganda pretty much right after the 1877 compromise. They just like really kind of jumped on it. So this is what he says here. He says, how the facts of American history have in the last half century been falsified because the nation was ashamed. The South was ashamed because it fought to perpetuate human slavery. The North was ashamed because it had to call in the black men to save the Union. Abolish slavery.
That's funny.
Yeah. Well, listen, he's not the only person that said it. I've seen a European breaking down how the so-called Negroes saved the Union. If they had not got involved in the fight, the North was going to lose the fight to the Confederates. That's an actual historical fact. So then Du Bois goes on and says this. These are some of the propaganda pieces that they put out about our people. This one book, let me see, he says, what are American children taught today about Reconstruction? Then he gives some of the current textbooks and notes regarding this. He says, all Negroes were ignorant, right? All were ignorant of public business. This is from a book called Elementary American History and Government, page 397. Another book says, although the Negroes were now free, they were also ignorant and unfit to govern themselves. From a book called American History for Grammar Grades by Everett Barnes, page 334. Another book that he cited says, the Negroes got control of these states. They had been slaves all their lives and were so ignorant they did not even know the letters of the alphabet. Yet they now sat in the state legislatures and made laws. This is from a book called The Leading Facts of American History by D.H. Montgomery, page 332. Goes on and says, in the South, the Negroes who had suddenly gained their freedom did not know what to do with it. This was from a book called History of the United States for Schools. This is the shit they was teaching kids in school, man. Then it goes on, he says, in the legislatures, the Negroes were so ignorant that they could only watch their white leaders, the carpetbaggers, and vote yes or no as they were told. This is from another book called The Advanced American History, Revised Edition, page 452. S.E. Foreman was the author. Goes on, he said, some legislatures were made up of a few dishonest white men and several Negroes, many too ignorant to know anything about lawmaking. This was from a history book called History of the United States for Schools, Hubert Cornish and Thomas Hughes. Another one, all Negroes were lazy, dishonest, and extravagant. These men knew not only nothing about the government, but also cared for nothing except what they could gain for themselves. This is from a book called How the United States Became a World Power. so anyway, there's more there. I mean, people can get the book or whatever. There's more there, but this adding on again to this whole white supremacist thing and the fact that is, you know, this is well documented stuff. It's not anything made up, and that propaganda that they use, and a lot of it had to do with the Daughters of the Confederacy, who wind up getting control over the content in these history books that were going out to these schools. You understand what I'm saying? And so this is the kind of stuff that was being taught right after Reconstruction.
Yeah.
Right after Reconstruction.
Oh, yeah. And sometimes white folks tell the truth as depicted in this. You got to be paying attention because they only normally tell the truth when they're fighting with each other. All right. So here's an article that was written, right? And it says just what I said. One white South Carolinian of an old aristocratic family uttered the truth in 1877. From the safety of autonomy, this voice in the wilderness spoke plainly. The most horrible tales of Negro murders that have ever appeared in radical sheets as the North would pale before the relation of incidents known to every white man in the South. The intimidation of Negroes is a stern and awful fact, yet what do Southerners say about it? It is the bloody shirt, the lying inventions of unscrupulous politicians, the last grasp of carpetbaggery and radical deviltry. So bitterly do Southerners hate to have the truth come out that it is at the risk of his life that any man dares to speak it. When a political crime is committed, they palliate it smooth over everything. Charge the blame on the murdered victims. A generation later, a few elder statesmen of South Carolina uttered the truth too. We had to shoot Negroes to get relief from the galling tyranny to which we had been subjected. Boldly declared South Carolina's Pitchfork Ben. That's Pitchfork Ben talking. Your man Pitchfork Ben. Pitchfork Ben Tillman, former governor, current United States Senator. He was speaking in 1909 at a reunion of aging red shirts and white rifle club members who roamed the state as young men in 76 16 shooter Winchester rifles at their size and a couple of huge Navy pistols stuck in their belts, assassinating African-American legislators and town constables, seizing ballot boxes, firing pot shots in field hands as a general warning they better have been by themselves. It had been the settled purpose of the leading white men, Tillman went on to teach the Negroes a lesson, as it was generally believed that nothing but bloodshed, and a good deal of it, could answer the purpose of redeeming the state from the Negro carpetbag rule. This is what a United States senator is saying. This is why reparations is supported by so much historical evidence.
That's right.
This is counter to what they already said they had to ratify in the 13th and 14th Amendment. They ratified it and then they went against it. They're openly admitting their guilt. They're openly admitting their criminal acts, and they're openly articulating white supremacy as public officials who are supposed to be under the rule of law of the United States Constitution by way of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment.
That's
They're
right.
openly violating the Constitution. This is our justice claim. This is the evidence that supports it.
Before you go, Ali, real quick, I want to say, because we have a question in the chat that I want to get to in a few, and it's centered around a part of tonight's topic when we speak about redress. And I'm going to get into some of that after Brother Ali Bego. Go ahead, brother. You muted.
Remember, the 14th Amendment actually disabled those people who went back into office who were not supposed to be in office. They're really illegitimate.
Exactly.
They're illegitimate, and the decisions that they made were illegitimate. They were nullities, right? And that should also be added into our justice claim.
That's
is that
right.
the things that those people decided on our behalf were actually criminal actions, because according to the 14th Amendment, the 3rd section, they were disabled. They weren't supposed to be able to vote, nor were they supposed to be able to hold office on any level of government based on the fact that they were involved in insurrection and they were really treasonous rebels and insurgent anarchists.
That's right. That's right. So I want to, in the spirit of what we are trying to do in teaching here on this platform, Be the Power, from our perspective, I want to answer the question, and I want to get into what my brother Dr. Logic had brought up on the last show about an initiative that we would like to see pushed dealing with a new Reconstruction. So I'm gonna put the comment up on the screen. This comment is coming from, I'm coming to get my bike back. I think Debo took his bike. It says, what do you want to do? Why do you want to do it? How do you plan to do it? What do you expect the constructive results to be? And that is a good, fair question. I love that question. And the answer to that question is so multifaceted. And I'm not going to pretend like we have all the answers here on this show at all. We can give you some of what we believe should happen and how it should happen and why it should happen and what the ultimate results will be. But I want to get into a part of what tonight's show is about, dealing with redress. First, I want to read the 8th Amendment real quick. Let me read this real quick. I want people to understand this, right? The 8th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States of America says, excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. Like when we get into understanding petitioning the government for redress and grievances, the 8th Amendment, in my opinion, this is my opinion, gives us a portion of a clear path to reparations and reparative justice, and what we feel should be an added amendment into the Constitution of excessive bail shall not be required. In what's called Black communities all over this land, for minor offenses, our bails were so high we couldn't get out. If you watch the Khalif Browder story, the brother that was in Rikers Island for 2 to 3 years, he was so psychologically distraught from that experience, he wound up killing himself. I think the bail was $3,000 or something like this. His family couldn't afford, or $4,000 to get him out. I've been locked up in New York City, given $10,000 bails, $10,000 bails for minor offenses. So we have this documented now. This is documentation. Excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed. A lot of times and in a lot of states, courts impose fines. Look at Florida and what Florida was doing. with their elections, they gave the I believe it was the state assembly legislated that felons had the right to vote, and I could be off on that. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but the governor then came back and said, well, they have to pay these fines. I'm just saying wrong about the state assembly. I don't know who passed the law. I can't recall at the moment. The governor, if I'm not mistaken, came behind them and said, well, they got to pay the fines off first before they can be eligible to vote. Still trying every which way to voter suppress us. Oppression in the South, right? And then it says, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. We have video after video, starting with Rodney King. Like, I'm not going to say forget testimonies, because we don't have actual evidence of testimonies outside of maybe the mugshots of someone that was beaten up by the cops. Like my mugshot was when I got finished getting it in with them back in the days, right? Now, we got video evidence of cruel and unusual punishments inflicted upon us. I'm going to stop sharing this screen and I'm going to go into this right quick. This is a short history of, hold on. Let me get into this real quick.
Hey, let me say this while you're looking for that. There's a comment that said that from the Amen guy again, I don't know why he keeps commenting, saying that reparations would overturn the Dred Scott case. Well, newsflash to you, my brother. The Civil Rights Act of 1866 already overturned the Dred Scott case. Continue on, man.
All right, definitely. Let me get into this real quick, right? Because it's about the right to petition the government for redress and grievances. This is a paper, a short history of the right to petition the government for the redress of grievances by Stephen A. Higginson. I don't know the publication date. I kind of was, rushing my research, doing my last minute stuff like I always do, but I was reading the Bloody Shirt earlier and then I had to do some running around. Never was a right so much mystified and magnified. John C. Calhoun, Senate, 1840. And there's a reason why he says that, and there's a reason why this paper starts off with that. It says in colonial America, the right of citizens to petition their assemblies was an affirmative, remedial right which required governmental hearing and response. Because each petition commanded legislative consideration, citizens in large part controlled legislative agendas. The original theory and practice of petitioning foundered when abolitionists flooded Congress with petitions during the debates over slavery. As a result, the right of petition was collapsed into the right of free speech and expression, a definitional narrowing which persists till this day. Again, something during the times of slavery were in the Constitution was revised in social meaning, not as it was drafted up. Let me continue. The original design of the First Amendment petition clause, stemming from the right to petition local assemblies in colonial America and forgotten today, included a governmental duty to consider petitioners' grievances. Transported to the national level, however, responsiveness to individual petitions proved problematic. In its early years, Congress attempted to pass favorably or unfavorably on every petition, but procedural strains soon emerged. Although sheer volume of business eventually might have severed the duty of assembly consideration from First Amendment petitioning, this result was guaranteed when petitioning became enmeshed in the slavery controversy. So things changed once it happened for us. Well, once petitioning was something that would have proven positive for us. It continues. Antebellum Congress were hostile to abolitionists' prayers and refused to respect petitioners' right to legislative hearing. Members insisted that Congress's competence jurisdictionally did not and administratively could not extend to petitions for emancipation. Instead, they adopted a series of anti-slavery gag rules that effectively abolished the right of petition. So when we're calling for what we're calling for in a reinvigorated Reconstruction, a new Reconstruction era, it begins with the right of petition for our redress and grievance collectively. When we take into consideration the hearing that was held on Congress on reparations, they brought in Danny Glover, they brought in a bunch of other people. That wasn't a real hearing because it wasn't coming from the people that are really pushing this reparations argument, which we have to be clear about is the ADOS movement. So Yvette and Tone and Sandy Darity, those are the people that should have been at the forefront on that panel because they are the reason why this conversation is not only a nationwide conversation, it is now becoming an international conversation because I believe the United Nations just put out another article, if I'm not mistaken, it was the United Nations talking about reparations for our people. So
they said that international law demands
reparations for our people. People, we have all the momentum right now. We have it.
Can you put that sister's questions back up on the screen real quick? I just want to say something. What do you want? Obviously, we're saying it justice, right? The bottom line is justice. Why do you want to do it? Why do you want to do it? In other words, we want to be justice for us is to be made American, to be made whole. How do you plan to do it? By what you're saying, petitioning the government for redress of grievances. What do you expect the constructive result to be? Again, to be made whole, to be made fully American, to have access to everything that American citizenship has to offer. Now,
life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Keep that in mind, because that's where I was going to go. I was going to get real foundational, real foundational. So this is what the Declaration of Independence says. I want the sister to hear this because I don't think that people really understand how deep the Declaration of Independence actually is. This is what it says, and I'm going to quote the same piece that Dr. King quoted, right? Because it's very, very fitting to our plight in this country. It says, "We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men," understand what they're saying here. They said all men. It doesn't say all white men. It says all men.
And they could have easily said that, right? They could have easily said that, right?
Said white men because black people were in colonial America at this time when they wrote this document. He said all men are created equal. And just to go a little bit further, there was a debate in the Continental Congress as to whether or not to put the word white in front of men. They decided not to do it because that wasn't the thinking at the time. They didn't want to exclude black people from this. So a lot of times when people say blacks weren't included in this, that's not true.
Not true.
Not true. Go look up the history of Crispus Attucks. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights. Look up the word unalienable if you don't know what that means. That among these rights are life, which they deprive people like George Floyd of, and other brothers and sisters, Sandra Bland, they deprive them of this right. They deprive them of that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. All three of those things have been deprived of our people at different points in time. That to secure these rights, the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it's the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. That's powerful.
Yes.
That's powerful.
Yes.
And we're not even talking about exercising the right of rebellion, or the right to destroy this government. We're not even talking about that at this point. All we're talking about is the debt that's owed to us. We're talking about based on the Constitution, where it says we have the right to petition our government for redress of grievance. Understand, this is a government that we're paying taxes to. So by all means, we have the right to petition them for redress of grievance. We're just demonstrating our right that's supposed to be protected by the Constitution to redress in grievances. So at the end of the day, when you ask that question, understand the foundational principles that this country was founded on, and that we're doing nothing more than trying to hold this government to the principles that's supposed to be cornerstone to their very existence. That's all we're talking about.
Yeah, I want to speak to that question too, because it's a very good question, like Abba said, and I think we all should speak to it. She said, what do you want to do? We want to honor first and foremost, me personally, and I think anyone on this panel will agree. We want to honor the memory of our ancestors. That's what I want to do. I want to honor the memory of my ancestors and achieve justice when they could not get it. I want people to understand that what we're doing is not a selfish act, but a selfless act. We're not necessarily doing it for ourselves. We're doing it for our ancestors and for our future that comes behind us. What we want is justice. What we want to do is not only just honor the memory of our ancestors, but to bring about justice. We want justice for our people in America because we built this country and we are due justice and we deserve justice. And we've been fighting for justice since we've been here. So that's what we want to do. We want to bring about justice in a nutshell. In a previous show, we explained how justice and reparations are synonymous terms. Why do you want to do it? Because it's the right thing to do. That's a simple answer to that. Why do you want to do it? Because it's what's right. It's the right thing to do. How do you plan to do it? Many different ways. My brothers spoke about a couple different ways. There's a lot of different ways to get at this problem. When we're talking about creating a initiative to force state constitutional conventions, specifically in the 11 states that succeeded, but in all states in general, because if laws are still on the books, for one, that were legislated during slavery, they shouldn't be there. We've all recognized that slavery is a problem. It was wrong. That's not nothing new. So if we still have laws on the books that were from slavery and was legislated by pro-slave pens, then they should be gone. They should be fixed, and we should do that. But more so, the state constitutional conventions need to be forced because it was promised that the freedmen was going to have a say-so in how the Reconstruction was going to be constructed, and they were assassinated. They were ran out of office, and they were overthrown. So we never got what the federal government said we were supposed to get because they assassinated the president. The accidental president came into office and put his homies back in office, and they overthrew our Reconstruction movement, our moment in history. That was for us. The 4 million freedmen were supposed to be able to carve out a space for themselves in this America, a land and a country that we built after fighting in every war, after being the economic currency that built the economic power for the country, after being everything that made this country great. We finally had a moment to carve out ourselves a space in this nation, and they robbed us of it legally and literally. So that's why we want to do that. What do we expect the constructive results to be? And again, justice. That's it.
And let me just add real quick. I want to add this real quick. Where is it? Oh, right there. I just want to, because I pulled this up on the last show. I thought this was a telling graph. Members of the Forbes 400 hold more wealth than all U.S. black families combined, the studies find. Not the whole list, just a few members hold more wealth than all U.S. black families combined.
I think it's the top three. I think it's the top three members.
The top three? This image right here. I didn't even pay attention to this image right here until just now. I just now really paid attention to this image. That red peg represents one European American or whom is called a white man, and that those green pegs represent our people who are also called black people on this land. I use the term Moors personally, right? And this is to show that their wealth alone outweighs all of, like, I mean, this is telling, but let me get to this graph right here, because this graph is vital for an understanding of why and what the end results should be, right? We see 1983, the blue line represents 1983, the red line represents 2016. So we see that everything was equal insofar as overall wealth, even though we were still at the bottom. I'm just showing where the equality was nationwide. So it was 84,000 in 1983, 81,000. It dipped to 2016. But when it's broken down in racial categories, it shows that in 1983, white wealth was at $110,160. But now in 2016, it's at $146,984, basically $147,000. Now look at black wealth. Man, I got to scroll down a little bit just to get down here so we could see it. 1983, our people, that's a very low number, right? But it was at least at $7,323. Today, it's down to $3,557 from 2016. That number, as we're in 2020, has maintained. It has not risen higher than that. I just seen a study in 2018.
So now, we lost while they gained.
We lost while they gained. But look what else happened. Latinos in 1983, these people that just started coming over en masse after the 1960s, they were worth $4,289. And if you compare that to our wealth, we were worth $7,323 in 1983. But then there's this switch. They go up to $6,591 in 2016, while we're still stuck at $3,000, $3,500. So this is a part of why we're doing what we're doing. Reparations, as we said on one of our shows, is the hill that we have to die on. It is the largest part of our fight, making us whole in the United States of America. Like, we got people that's out there hustling. Shout out to my hood dudes that's in the chat. They're giving me a shout out right now from my hood. Hamels Projects, Far Rockaway, Queens, New York. I gotta always shout my hood out, man. But we got people that's out there, they hustling right now because we have to hustle. We grew up having to sell drugs to get ahead because we wasn't made whole in America. The stresses of American society drove us to drugs. So we wound up selling to the people that were the elders in our neighborhood. Like, the end results is clear. It's clear. Like, this is what this thing is about. This is what this platform is dedicated to our educating our people so that they could get just in both. Like, I can't tell, like I said before, I can't tell my dudes, yo, y'all got to stop hustling overnight, man. Y'all killing y'all people. That's just not the right message right now. At the end of the day, dudes got to eat. Do I wish that? Of course. But I know that it is not reality. It's not rooted in realism. But guess what? If we had reparations and each descendant of American slavery got what they deserve, which is about $400,000 a piece, broken up, I would say at least 50, 60, maybe even $80,000 a year over a 5, 6, 7 year period, then they wouldn't have to do that. Our quality of life would be better here. We are still suffering the same injustices, the same indignities the same everything that we suffered during those times is just a little more covert now. That's it. So, I hope we answered your question, beloved. Again, if you new to the stream, if you're on YouTube, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. If you want to donate to the platform, you could cash at me at Lord Abba as well. Again, we're trying to grow our platform so we can start taking phone calls and things of that nature. Hopefully, I'm hoping to have that by next week. So, yeah, bros, go in.
Oh yes. Oh yes. I just want to say this, right? When it comes to this Reconstruction movement that we're speaking about, this new Reconstruction movement, it's about fulfilling the legacy that was stolen. I can't drive that home alone. I mean, that home enough. It was a stolen legacy from our ancestors. So what I'm describing is citizen committees being set up. The legacy was stolen from us. We read articles earlier about the fear of our people power. When we look at ourselves in a national level, we look and say, oh, we're the minority. But if you break that down the way federalism allows us to, and you look at states like Mississippi, South Carolina, Alabama, Louisiana, Georgia, you can see how our numbers are so concentrated that we're actually majorities in these areas.
That's right.
But they have taken criminal action to legislate unconstitutional laws to block us out from accessing democracy. So what we're saying is that there was a legacy that the freedmen had and it was stolen from them. So we're here as the children of our ancestors, fighting for them. That is our fuel. Our fuel is our ancestors to fight for them. Every day we allow these horrific crimes to go unanswered, it's another generational curse. We can't lift these generational curses until we fight and win the war for our ancestors' legacy. And I'm not talking about no ancient ancestors from no thousands of years ago. My mother's grandmother was born in 1834. You understand? I'm not talking about no ancient history. I'm talking about our bloodline lineage here in America. So we must understand that what's supposed to drive our entire fight. We must understand this is a movement that you should feel in your soul. You should feel this in your spirit. This is not just something that's the new wave on some the new woke type of stuff. That's not what this is. This is some serious business, and I'm very passionate and I'm very serious about that. We're talking about setting up citizen committees like they did. If you don't understand what the freedmen did, and what I'm saying is going to sound real foreign to you, but you're going to have to do some homework. We set up citizen committees in the past who were supposed to be able to participate in the Reconstruction. We had delegates, we had citizen committees. What I'm saying is we have enough evidence and precedence and ability to force the state into a position where they need to open up the state conventions to look at the constitutions and reconstruct them in a way that makes sense for everybody. Because you got states in Mississippi who still cannot even get a black governor into office because of the criminal way that they have made it in Mississippi and how they've destroyed democracy in Mississippi, to where the majority vote alone can't get you to be governor. You also have to win the majority of the 122 House representative seats. That's unconstitutional.
That's right.
You must understand that alone is a need, and that alone sets precedence for a state constitutional convention and have it to be reopened. But we talked about earlier in the show the fear of white folks being dominated under what they call black or African rule, what they call back then, what they call now black rule. They have a fear of a black America. They have a fear of what they call a black America anyway. So what we're saying is, until that is answered. Until the legacy of the freedmen's Reconstruction is fulfilled, we will always be a product and victims of public subjugation. And we will have this institutional racism and this structural systemic depravity, and we will be locked out of America as long as that is allowed. Because in a federalist country, you have state constitutions and a federal constitution. And if you're not oppressed by one, you'll be the other. So we have to fight for both. We have to understand our power in the states and our power to affect federal government. And we need to not only just focus on the president and focus on federal elections, but we have to be laser focused on what's happening in the state. And I'm going to end with this. It is a horrible tragedy and a nightmare to live in a country with 50 states that have 50 state constitutions and 50 ways to bring about state and political power. You don't have one ADOS governor, and we built the country. We always focusing about president. When we gonna have a black president? We had one that we called black, and we didn't get nothing out of him. But why won't you see what can happen if you get a few ADOS governors and start changing the way the General Assembly looks and seeing what you can do in your local and state governments? State rights and state government power has been given this country hell ever since it was been formed. Let's see if we can get in some of that. Let's see if we can participate in something. And that's all I got to say about that. Until next time.
Facts. Yeah, man.
Yeah, brother Ali, you want to add on to that?
It's not a lot to say. Pretty much said it all. You know, but only thing I would say is just when you think about reparations, don't think about a check. Think about justice. Think about correcting past wrongs. Reparations is a term that's used not just when it comes to the issue of chattel slavery. Reparations is also synonymous with restitution. It's also synonymous with repair. Like, you got to understand that the word repair is the root of the word reparations. So I'm not saying that a reparations bill will repair all of the damages that has been done generationally to our families, but it will help to set some things right. It will help to set some things right, particularly in the areas of wealth, the possession of wealth in this country, with the inequality of wealth that we have. We can address the issue of education. Finally, a lot of people think that education is a really, really major issue for us. I don't necessarily believe that it's a real issue the way that people are trying to make it seem like it is, but because it's almost like they're saying y'all are just a bunch of really stupid people, man. Like, you have no sense at all. You have no sense of business. You have no sense of anything. So you just really need to start from scratch with your education, and I don't believe that that's the case at all.
That's right.
I think that that's just a ploy that they use to try to derail the conversation so we could stop talking about it or whatever. Oh, you wouldn't know what to do with the money if you got it. Foolishness, man. It's a bunch of foolishness. So in any case, just look at reparations as justice. Just think about that. So whenever you start doubting it, like, think that you're doubting justice. Like, you're saying that we're not due justice. Other people are, like, say, the Japanese Americans. Justice is good for them. But foundational Black Americans, the American descendants of slavery, justice is no good for you. Jewish American or Jewish people in Israel, justice is good for them. But African Americans who built this country that all these people come here to come up on the backs of our work, justice is not good for you. You don't need justice. You can do everything yourself. All you got to do is pull yourself up by your bootstraps. But the thing that I like that Dr. King said, he said it's a cruel jest to tell a man to pull himself up by his bootstraps when he doesn't even have boots.
Criminal.
Definitely. Brother Josh, you want to add on anything? I'm gonna close it out with a quick breakdown of the 10th Amendment and what's going on in this country. So if you want to add anything, or if y'all have anything else y'all want to share, we coming up on a 2-hour mark. Yeah, but go ahead, brother Josh.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, man, y'all did a great job on the show tonight.
Oh, honest.
I did a great job, man.
I see
I'm
you
glad
you had your little one in the background.
Yeah, he just
Yeah,
went to
man.
sleep.
It's all good.
Yeah,
It's all good.
yeah, yeah. So, but I wanted to say, it's interesting now. We look at the climate, with all the stuff that's happened. We've seen that more people are open to the conversation of reparations. And I will say that you look at like Bob Johnson. We did just show on him last time. He, ADOS has been pushing the conversation, y'all. Like, and it's you have to look at ADOS and give them their props, because the stuff that we've been catching over the last year, people have been saying all kind of crazy stuff to us. People have been, going hard, slandering and coming up with all kind of wild accusations and calling us divisive and all of this kind of stuff. And understand, like, this is not a conversation. This is not a conversation that people need to take lightly. This is a very serious conversation. We're talking, and I saw the sister that said, why do we want reparations? Why do we want to do it? That was part of one of the several questions. Well, I would say, like, just go back and watch some of the. I was just watching a Claude Anderson video. I know we don't really, give him too much of a shout out, but I remember he was testifying with John Conyers, and he was saying a lot of what he was saying was on point, and it was talking about how we don't have any wealth and how well we're not going to survive if we don't give reparations. And essentially, economically, that still is true today. Now we have the exact data. We're not guessing. We're not going off of like real rough estimates. We got the exact data. This shows like 2016, the middle Black family, if you take away depreciating assets, was only worth $1,700. Just go look at your life today. We got the data that shows that the bottom 50 to 60% of Black folks together is not worth, everybody combined is not worth one single penny. It's worth negative billions. So to the point where Jeff Bezos alone could make Black America as a whole debt free. Think about that. Right. If we took Jeff Bezos' wealth by him, just one man, he could make all of Black America debt free. Think about that. So he's the number 25 landowner. If you go look at that landowners list, most of it's like family land ownership, which means that's an accumulation over a lifetime. And you think about what we should have had with 40 acres and a mule. We didn't get 40 acres, right? But then through the homestead, I think Dr. Derry said they were getting that a lot of folks got 160 acres. So they got 4 times of what we didn't get, in land. So when you think about why, like, it's not like why do we need it? It's like, what would happen if we don't get it? We already gonna be, the statistics say we're gonna be over zero median wealth at 2053. And like I said,
I don't think that person was serious, man. We answered the question and the person came back with the same exact question, and now they talking some other stuff. We answered that question. Yeah. I don't know.
Hey, man, what are you gonna do? You can't please everybody. Only thing I know is I just posted an article from the Wall Street Journal talking about international law demands reparations for American slavery. Wall Street Journal, CNBC, interviewing Dr. Darity. Dr. Darity gives a comprehensive breakdown. We're at the point where all of the arguments anti-reparations, all of the anti-reparations arguments, they're all easily defeated at this point, whether it's based on data, whether it's based on the historical accounts of what actually took place in this country, everything from convict leasing to redlining to racial housing covenants to racial gerrymandering, you name it. It's a debt. That's right, Oaktown girl. It's a debt. It's not about a handout. It's not about bootstrapism. It's not about do for selferism. I don't have anything against doing for self. our people have been doing that the whole time. Ain't nobody ever did anything for us.
Talk to him.
Everything we did through our own works and struggling and everything else, and maybe with the help of some allies. But at the end of the day, doing for self is not a new concept for us. I know they like to say that because that's what Elijah Muhammad was pushing. But the fact of the matter is, before Elijah Muhammad, you understand what I'm saying? There was already people doing for self. We ain't had no choice. We had no choice. You seen what Frederick Douglass said, the 4 million slaves that were free, they put them out on the street, basically. They had nothing. Ain't nobody do nothing for us. So it's not about that. But what we're talking about is just like when we gave the example before. Back when Apple offered its initial public offering, if you bought $1,000 worth of stock back in 1980 when they did their initial public offering, it would be worth about $435,000 at this point in time. So we're talking about the accumulation of wealth and the interest that would have accrued on it that would have been passed down generationally to our family members that we now, because of all of the racism and all of the things that went along with government interference and everything else, we don't have that, whereas white people do. That's what we're talking about. This is about justice.
Definitely.
What constructive outcome or result do we want to see? We want to see, well, we have, if we 14% of the population, we really, us having 14% of the wealth is not even justice. Understand that. That's not even justice because we're supposed to be elite. How does one group have that 60% of the population have 90% of the wealth? That's not
important.
Justice. That's an injustice if we got 2%.
I don't think people realize that so-called white people are only about 60% of the population. I don't think people realize that. I think people think that numbers are a lot greater than what they actually are.
And those numbers even start to get more defeatable when you start looking at it state by state. All right. And that especially in the southern states. If you're in South Carolina, you'll look and say, you'll wake up one day and say, hey, we the majority here. Why would you worry about if you're not the majority in Washington state, if you live in South Carolina or Mississippi? What sense do that make? Who cares? You can change Mississippi, man. You ain't trying to change Washington, you're trying to change Mississippi. So if you knew you had the Democratic majority, you had the power of democracy in your state because it's a state, you need to organize that way. You need to exercise the power that way. And I understand what this brother Jay Isaac is talking about. He said it's just scary. I don't want to see reparations go out like affirmative action did. Me neither. And that's why I agree when Bob Johnson said, if you want to start somewhere, start with what is most important in a capitalist society and what the oppressor cares most about. Start with the money. Give me the money, and we will create our own programs. I don't need the government investing my money into programs that's going to be tied up by red tape bureaucracy, and people are going to be stealing money out of the program. They're going to be trying to shortchange and shortcut and pull the teeth out of the initiatives and trying to water down the programs and give us less access to it and slow up how expedient it gets to us. I don't need none of that. Give me the money.
You don't need people babysitting you, in other words. You don't need anybody to babysit you.
We don't need to be babysat, man.
That's what they want to do. Remember what I kept reading from out of the bloody shirt when they was talking about we can't give the Negroes any money because the only thing they're gonna do is go get drunk with it. Today, it's the only thing they're gonna do is buy Jordans and Cadillacs and 24-inch chrome rims.
Right. And if I want to get drunk and buy Jordans and drive Cadillacs, it's my damn business. Get out my business. Right.
Give me my reparations.
So let's do this one again. So Bob Johnson's plan, he says each foundational Black American will get about what? 400,000, 350,000, something like that?
Yeah, about 4.
So you and your wife will get 350,000 a piece. That's about $700,000. Y'all gonna buy like $700,000 worth of Jordans?
Shit is complete nonsense.
But if I want to get a Cadillac with 24-inch rims in a bottle of Patron with one leg hanging out with my unlaced J's on and turning up. That's what I choose to do. That's my choice. That's nobody else. If I was doing that before, right, with the little bit of money I had, and I did this,
right.
like it's a crazy, illogical argument.
Hey man, we still here.
Mm-hmm.
Ain't nobody policing our pockets right now, but we still here. But so we get a little bit of extra money. All of a sudden, everybody got to be in our pockets. Hey man, what you doing with? Could you imagine somebody owing you something and telling you, well, you might go ahead and spend that money on a watermelon, and I really want you to get a cantaloupe, so therefore I don't think I'm gonna give you that money.
Don't make no sense to it. It's preposterous. And the fact that people, and some of our people would make it so crazy. They'd be like, you know what? Them niggas will go out and buy Jordans. They don't need no reparations. That's crazy talk. That's crazy talk. Come on, man. If you owe me, you better pay me. And if you even ask me about what I'm going to do with my money, we're going to have some problems. Mm-hmm. You understand that? Right. Owe me some money. And then talk about, well, I can't pay you because I don't think you're going to spend the money right, brother. You're going to pay me in blood. You understand that?
Right.
Right. Imagine going to work. You don't work the whole week or 2 weeks. Let's say you get paid every 2 weeks. You don't work 2 weeks and they say, well, you know what? I don't know. You might spend that money on. I mean, I don't know.
Go get drunk. I don't know.
Yeah, imagine exactly. That's an excellent point. And with that logic, your jobs can say, yo, we don't need to pay y'all because you're just going to drink and buy up this money. And you're going to get Cadillacs and Jordans.
You ain't going to do no good with this paycheck, Mr. Johnson. I'm going to hold it for you this week.
Yeah. You do know we need white Zaddy to hold our hands and shit.
Brothers, I apologize. I got to cut out early. I got to be
no doubt.
All right, definitely.
It's always an honor. It's always a pleasure. Gratitude. Stay tuned next time, people. We're going to get back after it.
All right.
Definitely. I had to throw that one up on the screen. You know, my people said, nah, you're the only person I knew growing up that'll spend all his money on books. Yo, it's so funny. I could tell a personal story real quick. Like I would get into it with my son's mother, and I would just pack up like all my books. And she used to be like, you ain't taking none of your clothes? But I don't need them clothes. I would just have a little big duffel bag full of books and just ready to be out or would be out. And then I'll be thinking about my damn clothes. So I want to do this real quick. I want to read the 10th Amendment before I close it out and just give a brief message on that real quick. The 10th Amendment says the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution nor prohibited by it to the states are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. And I wanted to bring that up in light of the fact that there have been pushes for legislation to tear down the Confederate monuments for years and take the flags down, et cetera, et cetera. Well, the power of the people today are tearing down the statues of Jefferson Davis and decapitating the statues of Columbus and the vestiges of the evil rebels, the evil devils that were the Confederates, who progeny still trying to implement the same type of iron hand rule today. Like, we have to understand our power as United States citizens. When I hear people making this argument or making this claim that voting ain't going to do nothing for us, it's because we don't understand our citizenship. We don't understand our power under the 10th Amendment. We haven't banded together in modern times the way we did during Reconstruction. This is the message I was trying to push on Sonetta TV last night when I had a brother up there talk about reparations is not going to be the real only solution. We need to start getting people life insurance. Like, what in the world are you talking about? What are you talking about? And I mean, just a bunch of other stuff that don't really add up to a stack of, what is it, a hill of beans, right? So
hold up, reparations, life insurance.
Yeah, this is what Brother Garfield. Let me call him out, because now he's mad. You want to have another debate. You lost every debate with me. Now you want to have another debate. He keeps saying he wanted to debate with me on ADOS. You didn't win that. And that's when I ain't even have as much of the information that I have now, and I still cooked him because he's just easy work. But I'm just saying, he doesn't want to have no real debate. He just want to get on Sinetta TV and talk. That's his only solution, is to just
he said last night, and Josh, you can speak to this because you got expertise in it. He said that life insurance is the saving grace, not reparations. He said this is what he said, white people respect money. So getting money from reparations is not it, but getting money from life insurance is the thing that's gonna fix it all.
Like, we gotta wait till we die.
So wait a minute.
This is Garfield from Sinetta TV, the non-ADOS guy that been against ADOS, Jamaican guy, been against ADOS from day one, which to me means he's just against ADOS, not just this group.
He's against
ADOS.
He's against justice, specifically for us. He's an anti-justice person for our tribe. That's what it is. And I don't like that. I don't like people like that. I don't like people like that, because my thing is, if you're due justice, I'm not going to try to get in your way. I would never do that.
That's right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
that's right.
I got two or three things I just want to say to that. First off,
we're gonna close it out after this though. It's 2 hours and 16 minutes in. I know you missed it. I know you missed the show. You trying to get your jabs and stuff up in there.
For sure.
Go ahead, bro.
Real quick though. What sense does it? Well, he must sell like.
I can't hear you, Josh. You sound low.
Hear me now?
Yeah,
a little bit better.
No, I hear you clear.
Okay, I was saying he must sell life insurance. That's probably why he trying to funnel.
He said he doesn't.
Oh, okay. All right, cool. Well, look, what sense does it make for you to tell a people who done built the country they don't get reparations, and then white people respect money? Yeah, we know, because they got it. They deny us from ours, and they use us as a prop to get to theirs.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about historically, and I mean, even to this day, you look at Minnesota and look at how, like, I think they said 54% of the Minneapolis budget is policing. Who are they policing? They're policing us. Look at the prison industry. This whole industry that we propping up, and we providing labor for which mostly is not us that's inclusive in that labor. So I want you to understand, what sense does it make for you to tell me that my solution for us only having 2% of the wealth is to go and give whatever wealth that I don't even have to mostly white-owned corporations, so they can profit on it over my lifetime. And then when I'm broke, I got to go and borrow against the money that I gave them. And then so when I'm broke, so then when I do die, my kids don't even get the full benefit because I'm underwater. I owe money on my policy. Or that's a normal scenario. The best case scenario, they profit on all the money and they give me some kind of payout, which again, that money is not worth the same. Usually, decades after you first been paying into it, it's not worth the same at the time when you were putting that money up. So, what sense does it make that that's going to giving money to the white corporation is going to close the racial wealth gap? What sense does that make? And I will never see that. My children will see that. And that's if I can keep it. What sense does it make? We're talking about them redistributing money to us, not us redistributing money to them. That money that we need to survive. That don't make no sense. It should be the other way around. So we don't need to pay them reparations. We need to get paid reparations. I wanted to say that. And then secondly, it's like the immigrant.
I like how you put that.
Yeah, to the immigrant thing, right? Like, don't deny us justice, like you said. I don't think anybody can put it any simpler. Don't deny us justice, because I think we see the thing that this is a trend. We just got to be honest. a lot of black immigrants seem to be apprehensive to the reparations discussion or about us getting reparations, or they're indifferent, like, oh, we don't need that. Well, first off, you don't interject yourself into a conversation like you speak for me or you speaking for us when we say we don't need justice. No, don't do that. And then also, like, consider us a separate tribe. If you're not speaking for reparations, just consider yourself some outside voice. But then also consider this. I talked about it earlier. If we had a black Steve Jobs, if we had a black, AOS, Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos or whatever, we would have those elites. If it would have been an altered destiny where we got reparations, or they just let us build straight out of slavery. Don't you think don't you think today, if we were our status was elevated, don't you think you would stand to benefit? Don't you think that there is some solidarity amongst the struggle from those that come from the Caribbean and those that come from Africa? Don't you think that and a lot of us are intermarried or interrelated and living in the same community? Don't you think you would stand to come up? And what does it look like? My brother, right? My brother, let's just say he was hit by a Coca-Cola truck, right? Or no, an Amazon truck. Let's say an Amazon truck hit my brother and knocked him and paralyzed him. And I got it on video, right? I got it on video. So my brother can sue. He gonna sue and win like $100 million. And what do I look like saying, you know what? I'm not gonna give them this video over this evidence, because if my brother come up, we not gonna be. It's gonna be divisive. It's gonna split us apart. What sense did that make? If my brother come up, I'm coming up. So if you really feel like that we're together and we're brothers and we're the same people as black folks, if you really feel Pan-African, then you should be working for our uplift, because by default it should help you out. And that's just what I wanted to share.
Definitely. Ali, you wanted to say anything before we closed out?
I was just going to say what Dark Skin Beauty said. I tell them to have several seats. I like that.
Definitely. All right, family, wrapping up another powerful show on Be the Power. I hope this information has reached you all in a way that forces you to think outside of the proverbial box a little bit, because what we have politically has been a bait and switch for generations. And, we have teachers in this space now that's educating us, and we're able to take some of that education and hopefully we represent it correctly and give it back to everybody else that's not necessarily connected in that circle, or not, what's a good term to use? They just not really into the whole political thing. I think that's a better way to look at it. So when they see brothers like us, they like, all right, I know that dude right there. I know that he's going to do everything within his power to give us the truth and give us the facts and help lead us in the right direction. So while I might not understand everything, if that brother say, I need you to go vote, I'm going to vote. So I need you to come register with this new political party, or just register to go vote. We gonna go vote, because I'm really for a new political party. I think that should be a push. We could debate and have some discussion about it over time. Anybody want to debate that? I understand that the Democrats have been the party that we have been voting for so long, but we see what the Democratic Party is all about. They are about bogus symbolism and kente cloths and taking a knee on some. I mean, what are they doing? Some of the Congressional Black Caucus get together and do like the Wakanda thing. I'm like, what are these people doing? Well, this is not a movie.
Joe Biden talking about reparations. We need to see about Native Americans. Man.
Yeah, Joe Biden adding Native. What about Native? Whataboutism has to be cut out. And this is why, what would happen if we had a party and there's 12.5% eligible African-American voters? What happens if we doubled or even tripled that number, right? We triple that number to whereas it's now 37, 38, 39, 40% of our people. What happens when this message spreads out and we're 80% of eligible voters outside of the people who may be incarcerated, and we form ourselves a political party, a real strong and true voting bloc, which includes allies, whether they're immigrants or whether they're European Americans, aka white people, right? But led and headed by us. We would make so much noise and we would never let nobody like Joe Biden get away with that. Matter of fact, he would never even be the nominee right now. Bernie Sanders wouldn't have been one of us, one of an ADOS, an American descendant of slavery would have been the nominee right now. Point blank, period, because our vote, as we show, swings elections. There's so many different layers and things that have to be unpacked with this discussion we had tonight. And it's going to require lawmakers and politicians outside of my brother we don't have any skin in that particular game. My brother Dr. Logic, he's done that in Springfield, Illinois. So he knows what it takes. He can break a bill down to you easily. He be schooling us on a lot of stuff politically, and we just have the mind frame to take it, research it, absorb it, and say, okay, I get that. And that's what we're trying to do with this platform for everybody else. So I just want to say our closing mantra, which is don't just fight the power, become the power. And then you will have the power to make a change. And with that, I say peace.
Peace.
Peace.